Don't forget that we're offering 2 free resources from our favorite positive reinforcement dog trainer, Irit Bloom of the Sophisticated Dog. Simply go to thisispawprint.com/ask and sign up.
Coming from the experience that I had, I think having my first dog was that first sense of unconditional love and pouring into something that wanted what I had to offer. And it was a sense of positive responsibility, not something that was forced on me. And then getting that was incredibly healing for me from the environment that I had come from.
This is Paw Print, an animal rescue community. Episode 46. I'm Harold Ree.
And I'm Nancy Ree. Today's guest is the talented Faydra Koenig. Faydra works with people who go through some of life's most difficult circumstances, helping her to become America's crisis coach. She also hosts her own weekly podcast called Coming Out of the Fire.
Faydra shares her own journey, including an abusive childhood, her marriage and her husband's legal battles, and her 3 dogs, Kate, Claire, and Sophia. If you want to learn more about Faydra Koenig, America's crisis coach, go to thisispawprint.com/46. That's the number 46.
Well, my name is Faydra. I live in Northern California. I've been a native, and I am known in pop culture as America's crisis coach. I come alongside people going through the worst times of their lives. My background is in the field of psychology. I've worked for 22 years in the fields of social work, family court services, and mental health. So I have a wide breadth of knowledge and direct work with people who are struggling and in a bad space. So that's where I have spent most of my career. And I transitioned to a more online presence and had the benefit of being part of HuffPost and Answers.com and speak and write and have a great brand new podcast that I absolutely love. So that's the nutshell version of me and what I do.
How did you first get interested in psychology?
My background, unfortunately, was pretty grim. I lived in a home that didn't value children. And from the time I was 3 until I was 13, I was being very abused. And I came out of that really wanting to understand people better, myself better. And when I hit college, it was kind of a natural draw to go into the fields of social sciences and psychology. So I got graduate degrees in those areas and went into work with direct service with helping people who have mental illness or families who are unable or unwilling to parent their children. So it was just kind of a natural fit based on my childhood. And I had developed a real strong sense of acts of service as my love language. So it also made sense that I would go into a helping profession.
You call yourself America's crisis coach. What was the crisis that defined you?
I was a little bashful when someone called me that the first time, but it stuck. And it was born of a couple things. I was really well known prior to about 3 years ago as America's divorce coach. And I had made quite a name of myself helping people and families have better divorce experiences. And 3.5 years ago, I went through a really significant personal crisis in relationship to my family, especially my husband. And when that happened, it was pretty brutal and it had a lot of public fallout. And that caused me to really become depressed and scared and lonely. And even though I had all these years of experience behind me, I ran out of tools. I didn't know how to come through the fire, so to speak. And I had to dig really deep and take some really specific actions to get through that. And I did. And once I came out the other side, I no longer really felt like America's divorce coach. I felt like there was something else. And my niche was just too narrow for what I had been through. And I was at a retreat. And one of the gals that was there was saying, you know, I've just seen you work with so many people in different areas besides divorce. You're really more America's crisis coach. And that's how it was born. And it really helped me level up as far as who I work with and the types of crises that people are going through, because I have been through an epic crisis myself. So the crisis I went through with my husband, we were dating at the time, and he was going through some legal crises. He was being accused of a white collar crime. And this was back when the attorney general was running for governor, and he wanted to look really tough on white collar crime. And so there were a number of people in the state indicted. And most of the time when that happens, you make a deal, they get their pound of flesh, everybody tries to regroup and rebuild their lives. And the person that I was seeing at the time and later married during this process, actually, he refused to take a deal, and he really believed in his innocence and was working towards proving that. And along the way, the government stripped him of his house, his income, froze his assets, and basically got him to where he was being represented by a public defender for a very, very complicated accusation. And he fought for about 6 years. And along the way, I got married, took on his son as my own child. He had an adopted son who would have essentially been an orphan in this process, and fought. He actually lost. And because of that, he was sentenced to prison, and he was sentenced an exorbitant sentence of 43 years. And so he's been gone for 3.5 years, and I became collateral damage to the situation. If I had just divorced him or walked away, I think socially I would have been more acceptable. But because I believe in him and believe in his innocence, and I wanted to stand there and be available for his son, whom I consider our son, I had to stay, and I wanted to stay. And because of that, I faced my own consequences. The parallels, which are interesting, is shame. When I was a young girl going through what I was going through at home, there was a lot of sense of shame because I felt different from other people. And that was a different type of shame. The shame that I experienced here was what I call shame on you, which is people putting shame on you that you don't necessarily feel obligated to receive. However, there's a lot of power in it, and it's very devastating. And it really brought me to the brink of what I knew as far as coping skills. So there are some parallels, but they were radically different types of crisis.
Powerful, and obviously so sorry to hear that.
Thank you.
How often do you get a chance to see your husband? What do you? How do those interactions go?
So we are about 3.5 years in, and we're in the appeal process right now. So we're very hopeful that things will have a more positive outcome. We can see each other on the weekends at this point. He's been moved a couple of times. The situation he's in now is probably the most, the easiest of the different situations we've been in, but it is what you think it is. It's difficult, it's demeaning, it's troublesome, it's worrisome, it's hard, but within it there's still positive. And I'm on the inmate family council, so I'm a liaison between families and the staff at the prison, and I do what I can to be involved and to make a positive impact on the situation. So we spend time probably about twice a month. We see one another, and certainly on the holidays.
Whether it's your podcast, whether it's a client, any stories you'd like to share of something that just really impacted you and really impacted your memory?
I would love to talk about the podcast because it's the most phenomenal thing. I released it on December 28th, and I really underestimated the enthusiasm that people were going to have for the show and to be on the show. And what's been so amazing, the show is designed so somebody who's in crisis right now, or if they know somebody in crisis right now, that they will not feel alone, because that's what happened to me. I didn't know anybody who had ever been through something as high end as what I was going through. And the only people I knew were fictional characters. And I wanted access to someone who could tell me, this is how we do this. This is how we get through it. So I wanted to be that for other people. And now I've interviewed literally over 100 people who have their own story. It might be different than mine. Some of them are actually similar to mine. And to have that camaraderie and to help them tell their story, because we're all in a place of more healing, and we have these really practical tips that we can give people to get through the fire themselves. And I'm just amazed because I felt, the weight of the world on my shoulders when it was going down. And now I've met people who have been through way worse things than I have, and it humbles heals me, and it helps me realize that there's a purpose for our pain and that there's a message within the mess, and it gives me a real strong sense of purpose. So some of the stories are phenomenal. I've had people on whose family members have been murdered. I've had people who have been born into cults and had to escape that. I've had people who have been married to true and honest sociopaths, which is not a term that I use lightly. And we've been able to show people what that looks like and what they can do to protect themselves or get themselves safe. So this sense of actually a public service is just super exciting for me. It was weird. I got a message today from somebody, and it was so interesting. I had a woman on who had run for public office 3 times, and she didn't win. And she went through this series of depression because politics, as you know, it's politics season. It's brutal. The things people say about you, the tactics they'll use to, expose you or get people not to like you. And, it was a really interesting and very specific interview. And of all the interviews, I get this message from someone who said, "Thank you so much for having that guest. I went through the same exact thing and I have never felt like I could talk about it. And here's somebody who had been through it too." So it was so interesting that unique, super, super unique thing really resonated with somebody.
You make a difference, so thank you, Faydra. We're talking to Faydra Koenig, America's crisis coach, also a podcaster as well. Changing gears here, why don't you tell us a little bit about your animal rescue story, or if you have more than one, share your stories.
I actually have 2, and one of them is very, very recent, but I'll start back with my beloved dog, Claire. So about 3 years ago, it was right after Jim left, I was contacted by a fan, and I have an English Springer Spaniel. Her name is Katie, and I've had her whole life. She's 11 now, and I oftentimes talk about her life and show pictures and things like that. And there was someone who had followed me on Facebook, and we weren't personal friends. We were Facebook friends. And she sent me this private message saying that she knew somebody who had just rescued this dog and really thought that she would be a great fit for me. And what's so funny is I was not looking to have another dog. Katie and I have been getting along just fine. I get this message and they're like, "Hey, you should consider this dog." And I'm like, "Oh, no, thank you. I'm not looking for it." And she was just very, very persistent. And she'd send pictures. And she's this little tiny dog that just looked absolutely dejected and she had been very, very abused. She is actually a Yorkie Poo cross, and she had been tied to a tree from the puppy stage. So her first year of her life, she'd been tied to a tree in a dirt lot, and they just kind of threw food at her. And her name was actually Terror. That was the name they had for her. And this woman who lived above them or in an apartment next to them would see her out there. And finally, she one day just had enough, and she went and took her and said, "I am taking this dog." Well, she takes her home, and she promptly has a massive heart attack. So she ends up in the hospital, and the emergency room nurse is listening to her say, "I have these animals. What am I going to do about these animals?" So the emergency room nurse goes and gets these animals, one of which is my Claire, and she's trying to rehome these animals. And so my friend Fan is trying to say, "You need this dog." And I kept looking for excuses. Well, does she bark? Does she, do this? Does she do that? And every answer was the opposite. It was, "Nope, she's doing good." Da, da, da. And so this woman, I was so amazed. She drove all the way from Utah to California to deliver Claire. When I got her, you couldn't even look her in the eye. I couldn't barely even hold her. She was a runner. She had no social skills. She hated men. I brought her home, and within, I'd say, a month, had completely melted her heart, had used all the same psychology we use with, our clients and raising good children, used it on her, a ton of turkey. And she is now literally the light of my life. And she is the most amazing dog. She went from barking at everything and hating everybody and not knowing how to show affection or receive it to being just this ball of goo. So that was my first story. Recently, I saw that I started having this idea of possibly getting another dog because Katie, again, is getting older. And I didn't know if Claire could ever be alone. She'd never been home alone. She'd always had a companion. So in the last couple of weeks, I started thinking, I might be open to another dog, but I never made a public comment about it or anything like that. And then sure enough, out of nowhere, a fan sends me this message. My friend just rescued this dog. She'd been running the streets for weeks. She's super, super tiny and frail. If anybody's interested, please let me know. And I really saw that as a sign. So I showed some interest. And sure enough, this gal lived fairly locally. We went and had a play date. And now, as of a week, I have had my beautiful baby girl, Sophie, who we are in the whole getting to know you, rehab, nursing her back to health stage. So
now, how many dogs do you have?
So now I have 3.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, Sophie's actually right beside me. She's very silent, which is a wonderful attribute for podcasters. My other dogs have to go to my daughter's house whenever I do interviews, but Sophie's actually right here because she's still in mama phase. I don't leave her at all.
Why don't we start with Sophie since she's right next to you? What do you like about Sophie so far? What makes her special?
Sophie's really special to me because she's silent. I think she's got like an elective mutism almost. I think what she's been through, it appears she's a teeny tiny, like a Yorkie Chihuahua cross. We're not quite sure. It looks like she may have had a litter of puppies, but I don't believe she's even 2 yet. So I don't know quite what happened there. She's very, very small. She's very meek, but you can tell she's just this kind, gentle, very girly soul. And watching her acclimate to food is always here, love is always here. This is a calm environment. Watching Claire want to play with her and having her kind of come to life, it's incredibly warming.
How about Claire?
I gotta say, Claire's my girl. I adore her. And I think the reason I adore Claire so much is Claire's like from the hood. She's like thug nasty, right? And she is, but she's a total diva. And I know that Claire totally knows how lucky she is. Where Sophie, I'm not sure. I think Sophie's just kind of like, I'm not quite sure what I think. Claire is like, she, at the drop of a hat, she can go back to the street, right? But she knows she's got it made. So Claire, who was a runner and all those things, she wouldn't run now for nothing.
I don't want to miss Katie because she's in there. I mean, she is now the grand matron, right? So
Yes.
What's special about Katie?
Well, Katie is my amazing love. I've only ever in my life had English Springers, and Katie's actually my 3rd. Her sister passed away a few years ago, and Katie's super special because I had gone through a divorce, and my husband and I owned a business, and our first dog, Kelly, had always gone to work with him. So when we divorced, it made sense that she would live with him primarily. And when our breeders found out about that, they called me, and as a gift, they said I could have pick of the litter. And that was so wonderful because these are expensive dogs. Went and was looking at all the puppies, same parents as Kelly, and there was a bag over to the side, and they're like, yeah, one of the puppies passed away. She was the runt. And I was like, oh, that's so sad. And we're standing there looking at the puppies, and all of a sudden the bag started moving.
Whoa.
Yes. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'll take her. So that's my Katie. And I've had her whole life. She had a few medical problems that we took care of. And she is just the most delightful dog. She was a therapy dog. I had a housing program for mentally ill people, and she went to work every day, and she provided that calm sense of soothing and distraction for people who are suffering mental illness. So she's had this long, productive, amazing life.
How do folks get in touch with an animal therapy organization?
States and counties are different. Where I was in Shasta County, there were just different trainings that we could go to, and I owned the program, so I didn't have to have anyone's, quote, permission to have her there. But she was trained and highly socialized so she could handle stressful situations, or she wasn't startled easily. Like, she was really able to go with the flow. So we just did some very specific training with local dog trainers. Now, interestingly enough, I just spoke with the county where I'm living now, and I'm enrolling myself, Claire, and Sophia in a therapeutic training program. So the girls, my 2 rescue girls, are actually going to become therapy dogs for children in foster care who are themselves abused. So that's a very specific program that they take you through. So I would imagine if you just Googled dog therapy programs for your local area, you'll see what your local area does.
When you think about Claire and Sophie, since they came from rescues, what would you tell people if they're interested in animal rescue, dog or cat? What makes them wonderful?
What makes them wonderful is they have had this experience that wasn't necessarily great. Not all rescued animals have been abused, but they've had a certain experience. And when they're able to find the consistency and the comfort of your home, it's so incredibly rewarding. And I believe it brings out a level of love that maybe they didn't even know that they had. So for me, just watching that happen and develop in them, I didn't realize how joyful that would be for myself. And I would love for everybody to have that experience. Now, there are certain things that I think could be difficult. I have had the benefit of always working from home. So I literally, when I got Claire, I kept her with me for, I think, 14 full days. Like, took her everywhere I went and really didn't go a lot of places. Same thing with Sophia. I've just kept her with me. So she's having this experience of bonding and predictability and things like that. If you happen to rescue and you work an 8 to 5, I don't know if that matters. I'm sure that shouldn't be a barrier, but I can tell you it's kind of like family leave. There's something to be said about just being and bonding with the dog or the cat so you can actually both benefit.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Can you remember why you wanted your first dog?
Well, coming from the experience that I had, I think having my first dog was that first sense of unconditional love and pouring into something that wanted what I had to offer. And it was a sense of positive responsibility, not something that was forced on me. And then getting that companionship and that unconditional love was incredibly healing for me from the environment that I had come from. I think that I have been broken in a certain way that most people don't experience in their lifetime. And because of that, I have a level of compassion and lack of judgment that I'm very willing to meet people exactly where they are and without filtering it through a judgmental lens. I can be in relationship literally with anybody anywhere that they are.
What are the best ways to find Faydra Koenig? Your podcast, your social media, your website?
So my podcast is called Coming Out of the Fire. If you're on iTunes or Stitcher, all you have to do is search for that Coming Out of the Fire title. If you're not, you can easily go to accpodcast.com and just capture all of it right there on the website. If you love websites, going to Doing Life with Faydra will take you to all my content. There's a great video there that shares my story in some pretty cool detail and imagery. And if you are a Facebook fan, it's easy to find Faydra Koenig and send me a friend request or like my fan page. And I'm on Twitter at Coach Faydra.
You and I have been Facebook friends for a few months. You were on this funny streak of simply taking photos of Starbucks cups with the various spellings and misspellings of your name. What's the proper way to spell your name, and what was the best misspelling you ever saw?
That's been a wonderful marketing technique for me because I work with celebrities and professional athletes and people who really want their privacy protected. And so I've found a way of marketing and doing name recognition and branding through showing these Starbucks cups. So the correct spelling of my name is F as in Frank, A-Y, D as in David, R-A. My favorite spelling of my name is P-H-A-D-R-U-H. That was my favorite one.
That's a great one. What does 2016 look like?
2016 is really about expanding my reach. The podcast has been phenomenal. You and I connected at Podcast Movement, and I'm sure we'll be there together this year as well. Right. Mm-hmm. My hope really in 2016 is to show up at some event like Podcast Movement and be known and sought out and have amazing conversations with people who recognize me for my work and for my passion and my desire to be part of that community. So I'm really focused on expanding the podcast and making sure that people know it's there and it's available, because we're, in a lot of noise. There's so many podcasts out there, and figuring out how to make it available to people and that it's even on their radar. So that's really my focus.
How about outside the podcast? What else are you working on?
My hope in 2016 is that Jim comes home. Our appeal has been filed. We should have an answer this year. And to be honest with you, when he comes home, our lives are going to be just so phenomenal. The story that we have to tell, there's a Christian aspect to it. There's a love story to it. There's a coming up against the odds story. And I would love to be able to go to those different platforms and inspire people with what we've been through. There'll be some closure. There'll be some big tears. And if it doesn't go our way, I'm going to have to dig even deeper and develop some even bigger, stronger skills. So all of that's going to happen this year. So it's going to be a really big year.
You've gone through some tough times. You obviously work with a lot of folks who have gone through their own tough times. What's some advice you can give to folks?
The best advice I give people is two things, and I'll condense it down pretty sound bite-ish. And if you want to explore it more, just get a hold of me. I'll be glad to talk to you. The two things are this. When you feel something associated with a crisis, you need to give yourself grace. And what that means is you need to feel whatever emotion you feel in its complete totality. If you feel anger, be angry. If you feel sadness, be sadness. If you need to cry, do it. If you want to laugh, do it. But feel it. Don't block it away. Don't diminish it. Don't set it aside. Don't keep your life so busy that you don't think about it. Once you've done that, the next step is to get validation, which is an outward sign of people propping you up and hearing you. Because once you feel heard, you will stop perseverating, you will stop feeling hopeless and helpless, and all of a sudden a light will go on at the end of the tunnel, and you will have some energy to walk towards it. I'm not going to say you're going to run. I'm not going to say it's not going to feel like you're wearing lead shoes, but that light will come on once you give yourself the grace and you allow somebody else to fully hear you. And then that's when all the change is possible.
We want to say thank you to Faydra Koenig for sharing her story. We definitely recommend listening to her podcast, Coming Out of the Fire. If you want to learn more about Faydra Koenig, America's crisis coach, you can go to our show notes at thisispawprint.com/46. If you'd like to nominate someone to be a future guest on Paw Print, you can simply email us at thisispawprint@gmail.com or go to our contact page at thisispawprint.com/contact. Don't forget that we're giving out 2 free resources from our favorite positive reinforcement dog trainer, Dorit Bloom. Simply go to thisispawprint.com/ask to sign up. If you'd like to meet me and Nancy on social media, Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, all you need to do is look for This is Paw Print, all one word. And if you'd like to listen to more episodes of Paw Print, you can find us on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher, in addition to our new YouTube channel. Go to thisispawprint.com/YouTube. We hope today's episode with Faydra gives you some tools to deal with the own crises in your life, and also gives you some inspiration to go out there and rescue an animal. We want to thank you, all of our listeners, for sharing Paw Print with your friends and family. And we'd like to say hello to listeners in Bellevue, Washington, Danbury, Connecticut, Libertyville, Illinois, and in the Caribbean, Curacao. You spread a positive message of love and peace by saving an animal. Have a great day, everyone, and see you next time with another great interview on Paw Print.
Paw Print is a production of EVER Education.
You can't handle the truth.